Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the webinar Understanding Green Public Procurement by Enterprise Ireland. My name is Ankush Shirsat and I'm the Sustainability Specialist in the Sustainability Solutions Department of Enterprise Ireland. We are recording this webinar on Understanding Green Public Procurement as part of our 2025 Sustainable Enterprise webinar series. This is the recorded version of the webinar, and therefore if you have any questions after listening to this webinar, please reach out to us at enterprise at green@enterprise-ireland.com for more information. We are recording today's webinar in collaboration with Bid Services. In previous webinars of this series, we discussed the importance of developing ESG policies in meeting ESG reporting obligations required by customers, investors, and other stakeholders in the supply chain. In April 2024, the Government of Ireland published Buying Greener, the Green Public Procurement Strategy and Action Plan 2024-27. An aim of this policy will play a key role in driving the implementation of green and circular procurement practices across the public sector. The green public procurement is a process whereby public authorities seek to source goods, services, or works with reduced environmental impact throughout their life cycle when compared to goods, services, and works with the same primary function that would be ordinarily procured. Ireland has committed to implementing green public procurement, and the implementation of green public procurement has an important role to play in delivering Ireland's environmental and wider sustainable development objectives. From January 2025, all tenders for goods and services over 50,000 and works over 200,000 must include sustainable and environmental technical specifications and selection and award criteria. Companies need to be aware of the new green public procurement rules in order to win the contracts in the public sector. So therefore, the focus of today's webinar is the National Green Public Procurement Guidance, the new green public procurement requirements and criteria sets for sectors, and what businesses must do to address the environmental impacts of their tender submission. Our speaker for today's webinar is Dr. Peter Brennan, Director of Bid Services. He's a subject matter expert on green public procurement, and in past, Peter was a board director of Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. And he was also the advisor of the Department of Climate, Energy and Environment on the drafting the new Green Public Procurement Strategy and Action Plan. Bid Services provide a full range of tender management services to companies, and Peter advises suppliers on how best to win the tender competitions. He advised the Orchestra Joint Committee on Climate and Energy and lectured on DCU Master's Program on Sustainable Energy Finance. He has also authored a book on investment in the green economy. So we will hear now from Dr. Peter Brennan on understanding the green public procurement. Thank you.
This presentation is about green public procurement, and I'd like to thank Enterprise Ireland for allowing me the opportunity of presenting to their client companies on this important subject. I'm going to cover EU policy and national policy and guidance on climate and the circular economy. There's a lot of information available, and I'll identify the sources of information for you. I'll go into a bit of detail on supplies and services, and indeed on works contracts, given there are quite a few works-related businesses on the call, and conclude with some key messages for everyone. Well, a little bit of background about myself. I think it's important at the outset. I have a lot of experience in climate, energy, and sustainability. I chaired the Institute of European Affairs group on climate change for the best part of 8 years. I was an advisor to the Oireachtas on climate change and helped draft the first Climate Change Act. I've lectured on the subject at DCU on a master's program. I've written an authoritative book on investments in the green economy. I was a former director of the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland for 5 years. And particularly in the context of this presentation, I was the advisor to the department on the drafting of the Green Public Procurement Strategy. That is the main focus of today's presentation. It's important to put it in context. Procurement is big business in Ireland. If you take account of the spending, particularly the capital spending of of the commercial semi-state companies, and you add in what's happening in Northern Ireland, best estimates suggest that we're going to spend between 30 to 35 billion euros every year. This is big business, and the government has recognised this in the programme for government. And green public procurement sits within a very important part of government policy. So what is green public procurement? Well, this is a definition that the European Commission uses. It's a process whereby public authorities or contracting authorities seek to procure supplies, services and works, with the important words, with a reduced environmental impact, and another set of important words, throughout their life cycle, when compared to these supplies, services and works with the same primary function that would otherwise be procured. So the big emphasis here is on environmental impacts over the life cycle or the use of that particular product, service or works. It's in the context of a wider discussion on sustainable procurement, which is a much, much wider concept and is outside the scope of today's presentation. It includes, among other things, social considerations in procurement, which includes, for example, helping disadvantaged groups, charities, social enterprises, long-term unemployed, etc., getting access to public tenders. The government is about to introduce new rules on social procurement later in the year, and maybe we get a chance to present on that when the time arises. Back to green public procurement. It is very much been driven by EU policy and national policy. So the companies listening to this presentation really need to understand the nitty-gritty and the drivers of the policy. Because if you understand where public bodies are coming from in terms of what is behind their procurement arrangements and strategy, you will start to crack this particular nut. We have a lot of commitments at EU level and consequently at member state at Ireland level to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, to improve energy efficiency, and also to espouse what they call the circular economy, which is the better use of resources. The more recently published Climate Action Plan sets the policy context for the current arrangements in relation to green public procurement. Just as an aside, these targets are going to get significantly stricter from 2030 on. The circular economy is now embedded in green public procurement. It is not just about carbon or energy efficiency, it's a much wider discussion. There is a circular economy programme. Government departments are acutely aware of what they have to do in terms of this programme. There's a lot happening in the space. I just cite one example here, which is a document that the Irish Green Building Council has produced. You do need, if you're bidding, to become familiar with these documents and understand the drivers. Why are public bodies espousing and putting circular economy requirements into their tenders? These documents will tell you how. And I keep emphasizing it. You do need to understand the policy drivers, which enables you to make a much more informed tender bid. This isn't just theoretical. There are two significant pieces of legislation that are very much fundamental to green public procurement. The first is the act that is called the Climate Action and Low Carbon Development Amendment Act, which puts in place a statutory basis or legal obligations on Ireland to reduce its carbon emissions. And the second act is the Circular Economy and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. So the circular economy policy is actually underpinned by statutory basis. So there's no wriggle room. This is a legal requirement to cut carbon and to embed circular economy principles into the purchasing of supplies, services in Ireland. The way it's done in relation to carbon is we set a carbon budget, and between 2021 and 2025, we're coming to the end of that period, we can emit as an economy 295 million tonnes of carbon. We're not going to meet that target. We're going to be short. And that short will be carried forward to the next carbon budget, which was supposed to limit carbon emissions to 200 million tonnes. That's probably going to be closer to 170 million tonnes. The main emitter of carbon in Ireland is the agriculture sector, and they're not covered by procurement. So what procurement can influence is in some sectors that are particularly carbon intensive. We know that we're not going to meet these targets, and as a consequence, the Irish Fiscal Council and the Climate Change Advisory Council have said we're going to be fined. Well, effectively, we'll have to purchase carbon credits if we don't meet these targets. So you as a business, for every kilo of carbon that you can save in delivering a contract that has been procured, you're saving potentially the economy money. So the whole emphasis now is on businesses when they're tendering into government to do so in the most carbon efficient manner possible. And that's the essence of green public procurement. The public sector, in fairness, is way ahead of the first base on this. Most public bodies that I work with and advise have had public sustainability strategies for quite some time. They're either called sustainability strategies or climate action mandates. For example, the Chorus Umper CIE group and their other companies within the group have all got extremely detailed sustainability strategies. So if you're bidding into Irish Rail, you really do need to understand what their sustainability strategies are, what are their objectives. So your solution has to relate to how, for example, Bus Éireann, if they go out to tender, how you will help them reduce their carbon in line with their strategy. It's the same with the universities, and all ETBs, education and training boards, all have climate action strategies. So when you see a tender from one of these public bodies, you have to say to yourself, how can we as a tenderer help that body achieve or contribute? What way can we contribute to that particular climate action strategy? HSE, one of the biggest procurers in Ireland, has one of the most advanced types of climate action strategies. If you're bidding into the healthcare sector or to individual hospitals, understand what the climate drivers are. It's the same with local authorities. All local authorities have extremely detailed climate action plans. Cork, for example, has even carried out a baseline emissions inventory. So if you're bidding into Cork City Council, how will what you're delivering help them reduce their carbon or improve their energy efficiency? Irish Water, all the commercial semi-states. I could go on. Nearly every single public body of significance has a sustainability strategy. The private sector is doing very well. Business in the community has been leading in this area for well over a decade and has a significant number of members who are committed to embedding sustainability into their business model. However, a lot of SMEs and smaller micro businesses are not yet there. And that, I hope, will change over time, but it does place the smaller businesses at a, I wouldn't say disadvantage, but they're not as up to speed as some of the larger bidders in Ireland. This is a huge number of companies that are engaged with business in the community. You will notice there are very few SMEs on this list. There will be more, I'm sure, in time. The government is acutely aware that businesses must get involved in bidding on a climate sustainable manner. This climate toolkit for business is a Department of Business and Enterprise free piece of software. If you want to know what your climate footprint is, you click into this particular piece of software, you put in your inputs, and in short order, you will get a statement as to what your carbon footprint is. And if you do nothing else after today's presentation, find out what your carbon footprint is. So therefore, every time in future, when you're bidding, you will be able to tell the public body, our carbon footprint is X, and in relation to the delivery of these supplies, services, or works, we estimate the carbon footprint of this particular contract to be Y. It's very easy to do, it's free. Also potentially join IBEX Chapter Zero Ireland, which is a network of people who are interested in sustainability and committed to climate. Enterprise Ireland also has a significant number of incentives that you'd be familiar with, and I know there'll be a presentation on this later. There's a lot of new products and new ideas coming into the marketplace. This, for example, is the Carbon Performance Ladder, and there are many more. I think the Irish Green Business Council, among other things, other organisations, is absolutely at the forefront of looking around Europe to see what software tools and what arrangements and processes can we bring into Ireland to help us win tenders, and to do so in a sustainable manner. To come back to GPP strategy, this was adopted more than a year ago by government. The arrangements are fairly straightforward, and I'll come into some of the detail now in a minute. But for tenderers, you need to know from the 1st of January last, green public procurement criteria must apply to all low-value tenders over 50k for supplies and services, and the threshold for works is very low at 200,000. This applies across the entire public sector, and there are nearly 3,500 public bodies covered by procurement, so they all should be applying these green public procurement criteria. There's an instruction in the policy document to contracting authorities to embed green public procurement into their procurement policies and into their corporate procurement plans, with the Office of Government Procurement taking the lead. What's the basic thinking behind the green public procurement strategy? Well, as a purchaser of a lot of supplies, services and works, the government has significant leverage in terms of expenditure. So it can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by requiring you as tenderers to submit proposals and solutions that are low carbon, that have low embedded carbon in products, for example. Very much using procurement to improve energy efficiency, very much requiring the use of goods with standards, eco-labels to the highest possible level and standards acceptable at EU level. Also addressing resource use and indeed air quality and environmental pollution writ large. So green public procurement is seen as a policy lever in a way to help the government achieve its carbon, energy emission and circular economy targets. And the more we achieve these targets, that 26 billion bill that has been mentioned by the Irish Fiscal Council will get less and less and less. The document is transformational. It's a new regime for the public sector. Every single public body now is looking at climate action in these mandates. This document sets out the scene to help the public authorities, public contracting authorities, embed GPP into their tenders. It recommends minimum environmental criteria. And one thing is going to be notable, there'll be a significant increase in reporting and monitoring. So you can expect to see in your future tenders a requirement on you as a supplier to provide data and metrics to whoever is tendering to enable them in turn to report into the Office of Government Procurement, or SEAI. So reporting and monitoring is going to be a major feature of GPP going forward. And also this document espouses and brings in the circular economy. There is a rule, we'll mention it in a minute, of comply or justify. Public bodies will be told you must use green public procurement or justify why you're not using it. And there'll be a significant burden of proof had to be placed on a public body that decides where there is national guidance why they're not using GPP. There are some important caveats. Every single tender using GPP must be contract specific. A public body just cannot request you as a tenderer to have generic sustainability or corporate governance standards. They must be contract specific. The requirements must be verifiable. The requirements must be justifiable and must be proportionate. You cannot be asked, for example, to implement an ISO high environmental standard for a low value contract. That probably is arguably not proportionate. And I'm saying this because an awful lot of Irish SMEs, certainly the ones that I talk to, brief and train, are not at first base when it comes to having ISO energy and environmental standards. The micro businesses, this is a very strange phenomenon to them, and they're only beginning to learn and understand the importance of energy and climate management. So green public procurement is relatively new here. It's been in most European countries for at least a decade. We're playing catch up, and we're playing catch up at a very fast pace. At EU level, it's all voluntary. Now, there's an impression that what the government has done in this document is imposing mandatory requirements. Let's talk about that now in a minute. There isn't any enabling legislation. There would be hopefully guidance produced by DPER, the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. That guidance is long, long overdue. Nearly a year after the Green Public Procurement Strategy was published, there's still no sign of guidance to accounting officers to tell them what is expected of the departments and the agencies under the departments. So we have to wait, to be quite honest, to see what's in this DPER circular before coming to firm conclusions as to whether this is voluntary, persuasive, or mandatory. There's no sign of any enabling legislation to give effect, for example, to reporting requirements. Once the DPER circular is published, and is due out imminently, and it has been for the last 3 or 4 months, the Office of Government Procurement would change its templates, its contracts, and its guidance, because obviously the DPER circular is the driver for implementation, because accounting officers basically have to comply with such instructions. There is a revised circular economy strategy promised, still hasn't appeared. Guidance has been promised under the Construction Works Management Framework, but I understand this may not happen, certainly not next year into 2027. You have to say to yourself, where's the urgency? I don't see a sense of urgency in relation to works procurement. There should be far more guidance, given that works contracts, above all other contracts, have the potential to reduce carbon. Back to the Green Public Procurement Strategy. There are sector targets. I'm just going to highlight some of them. So if you're on the call and you are tendering into the public sector, check out the sector or product targets that exist, because you'll have to comply with them. For example, in relation to food procurement, there are extremely well developed targets about canteen and food services, about setting standards. The same with ICT equipment, textiles, paper and printing, energy related products, cleaning, road transport and services, and repair and use. These 12 targets are core to the Green Public Procurement Strategy. They're the only sector targets set in that document, but there's a major however. I'll come to that however in a minute. The Office of Government Procurement is committed in relation to all its existing frameworks and dynamic purchasing systems to review them all, to introduce green criteria where appropriate, where verifiable, and to make them contract specific. So if you're interested in finding out what these new arrangements are, you can Google this document, check it out. It contains details of over 100 frameworks and dynamic purchasing systems. A very important tool for the public sector, but it's also important for you as tenderers to know what's in the pipeline, potentially in relation to green, for the sectors or frameworks you're bidding into. The Environmental Protection Agency is a huge resource in this area. It has issued guidance. This is the 3rd edition. It's exceptionally well written. So as a piece of takeaway from today, I mentioned sources of information. It is essential, if you're bidding into the public sector, that you read this document. Now, it will be updated when the DPER circular is eventually published, but it does set the policy framework and how to do guidance in relation to the key sectors that are covered currently by green public procurement. There are obviously priority sectors. Let's have a slow read of the sectors involved, and to see, for those of you on the call, are they relevant to your business? Road transport, services, and the purchase of vehicles. Of huge guidance on ICT products, including data centers, is one of the most well-developed guidance. These are sectoral guidance produced by the EPA. Food and catering, cleaning, the design, construction, and management of office buildings. So anyone on the call who is in construction, this is a must read. There's guidance on lighting, indoor and outdoor, heating equipment, heat pumps, boilers, cogeneration, energy-related products, paper, printing, textiles, and I didn't add furniture, which is the more recent one. You will note that a significant number of sectors are not covered currently by EPA guidance. And one of the sectors least represented is the whole area of works. There's only one sector, subsector of works procurement, currently the subject of guidance. So I'm going to take you through one of the guidance notes. They're all available on the EPA website, and they all look the same, they're all structured the same, and they all have a similar set of recommendations. So I'm going to use this as a sort of benchmark to help you to familiarize yourself with what's in the documentation. Every single guide in this case for ICT products and services will explain what's in scope and also what is out of scope. You can see from this particular screenshot that a significant amount of computers, computer equipment, portable computers, smartphones, data centers and services and cloud, all contracts in that space from the public sector's perspective will reference this particular document. So if a public sector buyer is considering procuring mobile portable computers, they will go to this document and cut and paste out and consider the recommendations in this document for technical specifications, for selection and award criteria, and put them into the tender. So if you're reading and understand these documents, you're going to be much better able to respond to those tenders. Here, for example, is an extract, again, another screenshot, as to what the key environmental impacts might be of procuring ICT products and what the GPP approach is. So these are sort of one-liners perhaps, but they're messages that you need to communicate in your bid responses. And if you can address these key issues in your solutions, you're beginning to score higher marks. It tells you again what's in scope, what's out of scope. It also provides a list of the regulatory arrangements in the ICT sector. Certainly what's of real importance are the use of eco labels. They apply, these are in EU guaranteed labels. That means that the product being procured has been procured or manufactured in a sustainable manner. So a lot of reference documents. You don't need to read every one of them, only the ones that are relevant to your particular subset or the product or products you're producing. Every document, in this case, here's an extract in relation to data centers. It will spell out what the recommended qualification criteria are. In this case, the selection criteria. Server utilization, control of hazardous substances, cooling energy management. It also sets out what the recommended technical specifications are. So the public sector will read these technical specifications and, as relevant to each contract, bring them into their tender documents, such as server active state efficiency, environmental monitoring, waste heat use readiness, and the renewable energy factor. It will also recommend award criteria. This is where the scores are. For example, it may set an award criteria for idle state power, for server unit utilization, etc. You, as a tenderer, if you're fully on top of this document and you're reading it and understanding it, you will be able to respond to all of these criteria. You will note there are two, core and comprehensive. In 99.9% of cases, only core criteria will be used. the comprehensive criteria are quite complicated and probably won't apply in Ireland for the next 3 to 4 years. Quite a few of you on the call are in the professional services sector, and professional services is one of the biggest categories of procurement in Ireland. And obviously the same applies to services sectors as it does elsewhere. The government wants professional service providers, including construction professionals, to deliver services into the public sector with the least environmental impact. Now, the guidance in relation to professional service is quite thin. As you can see here on point 2, this is an extract from the EPA guidance. All criteria must be linked to the subject matter of the contract. This is quite important. So you cannot be asked as a professional service provider to have a sustainability strategy. What you can be asked to do is to have a solution that demonstrates how you're going to deliver the contract in an environmentally least impactful manner. Marks will be awarded in relation to the environmental impact. You will also be asked potentially to demonstrate what your carbon footprint is, because as I mentioned right at the outset, every single public body, once this famous deeper circular is published, will be required to record, monitor data in relation to carbon, energy efficiency, and the reuse of resources. So you probably will have to report on all of these and will be scored as an award criteria based on what your submission is. The Green Public Procurement Strategy also recommends to public bodies some what are called selection or qualification criteria. You may be asked to produce recent and comparable references where environmental and sustainable considerations were used to deliver public or private sector contracts. You may be asked to deliver the CVs or with high environmental credentials of your team where relevant. You might be asked for product samples. You may be asked for ISO, which is the international standards for energy or environment or others. And in relation to EMAS and these very significant ISO standards, it is not yet a mandatory selection criteria. I don't expect it will become a mandatory, and it's basically a risk-reward decision for a lot of companies whether you should move to ISO, and I strongly recommend that you do. If you're bidding frequently into the public sector, these high environmental management or energy management systems and processes are going to become the norm in the fairly near future. So you need to start at least aligning your processes and practices to the best international standards. And over time, migrate and get certified to ISO, the relevant ISO standards. This will give you a much better understanding of environment and energy. It will get your standards and processes to the highest level, and public bodies will give more marks and more attention to companies that are aligned or moving towards these high standards. Same thing with product standards. There are 80,000 eco labels across the European Union. If you're supplying supplies into the public sector, do those products have eco labels? There's a separate set of arrangements, as you may appreciate, for construction products. But do your products have these eco labels? If they don't, get an eco label or equivalent, so therefore you can demonstrate in your tender documents that the product that you're supplying is sustainable and has been manufactured in a sustainable manner. One of the recommendations in the Green Public Procurement Strategy is that all tenders should have a 5% allocation for green. Now, this will be confirmed, one suspects, in the deeper circular. So every single future tender over 50k will require green public procurement. Now, 5% is a very high percentage. In my experience, a significant number of tenders are won and lost on the split of 1 percentage point. So if you can score really high in this GPP, you have the potential of getting a winning bid over the line. Typically, here's in italics here, is the type of language you probably will start to see in tender bids. Excuse me. Tenders, this is a guidance given to tenders. Tenders must demonstrate how their proposed services, supplies, or works comply with the sustainability requirements set out in the technical specifications, and how environmentally sustainable processes or products will be embedded in their proposed approach and methodology. Measurable environmental impact should be quantified as appropriate. That comes back to the reporting. Can you respond to that? Well, if you can't, we're going to have to help you do so. So how do you score this 5%? How do you get 100%? How do you score full 5%? Well, the critical thing, as I said at the outset, you need to understand every public sector body's climate or sustainability strategy. You have to get into the nitty-gritty, into the fingernails of the strategy, understand why this particular product works, is being tendered, and how it fits into that particular organization's sustainability or climate strategy. It would help if you had your own sustainability strategy. That might be a big ask for smaller companies, but certainly any mid-cap companies should be moving towards a sustainability strategy. And Enterprise Ireland have a lot of grants, vouchers, and supports to help companies move up that sustainability chain. Set out your environmental credentials. Set out your track record in relation to sustainability and delivering in a least environmental impact. Explain how your solution fits with the particular requirement. Give your carbon footprint in the document. Explain how you got it. Explain, for example, that your carbon footprint is 180 kilos and that the consultants delivering this particular service using their computers, which is the only carbon impact of your solution, will probably spend 24 kilos in a year delivering the solution, which is very, very low, and benchmarked against your competitors is an improvement of whatever. Provide metrics where you can. That's critical, I think, for any business on this call, because there's going to be so much more monitoring. And if you can provide data and metrics, you're making life easy for the public sector bodies. Also, absolutely address resource-related issues where appropriate, waste, etc. So it's not that difficult if you step back to score quite a number. I've seen a lot of tenders marked recently where 5 out of 5 has been awarded. So companies that go to a certain amount of trouble and get to understand this agenda will get all of those 5 marks. Switch tack a bit. I know there's quite a few on the call who are in the works area. The Capital Works Management Framework governs procurement of works. It is a complicated set of rules and guidance documents. It's nearly 20 years old at this stage. This is what appears in the Capital Works Management Framework in relation to sustainability, just referencing the strategy, but not much else. Key updates have been promised in relation to sustainability and green, but that's not going to happen anytime soon, so I'm told. It'll probably be 2027 before a new suite of documents and guidance on carbon, energy efficiency and circular economy will be applied for the Construction Works Management Framework. Disappointment given our climate targets and the fact we may have to spend a huge amount of money buying carbon from other countries to meet up our shortfall. There should be a higher degree of urgency, to my mind, in relation to bringing stricter and more transparent guidelines into the whole area of works. At EU level, there are significant guidance documents available for road design, construction and maintenance, road transport, road lighting, public space maintenance and wastewater. We don't have any of these guidance in Ireland. But if you are bidding into the public sector, you don't necessarily have to rely on what might be happening in Ireland in the future. You can reference what is happening at EU level and basically explain how your work solutions fit and into what is happening at EU level. I have been at several meetings recently and have been very, very impressed with what the Irish Green Building Council are doing and their members. The Irish Green Building Council is at the forefront of helping companies in the sustainability journey in relation to works, and they must be congratulated for that. For example, they published a document on, you see here on the left, on circularity, whole life carbon, which is a complicated area. So if you are interested, check out the documentation that is being published by the Irish Green Business Council. What will be happening is works tenderers will be asked to set out their environmental, climate credentials in relation to the preliminary project brief, which will transfer into the definitive project brief, and then when the contractor is appointed, that will be so informed. The works guidance I mentioned on the design of office buildings is a great reference for works contracts generally, although it's limited to office buildings. A lot of the technical specifications apply to quite a few other categories of works. What's going to drive huge change is the implementation of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. It hasn't yet been implemented in Ireland and won't be for another year or so. But again, anticipating how this directive or regulations might apply and putting in your provisional solutions consistent with the directive, again, is a way to score more marks. There is a promise that national guidance on buildings is going to be produced, and this will be hugely important to anyone in the space of retrofitting. There's EU guidance for buildings in draft. So in short, where relevant, use the sectoral guidance for office building design, construction and management, which is in turn being updated. There's also guidance for heating equipment and lighting. There's also guidance on reducing embodied carbon in construction products and in cement, in steel and in timber. You need to get the guidance for these specific product areas to be up to date in terms of what will be required of you in the future. And hugely importantly, anyone in the works area needs to be familiar with and able to apply life cycle costing. The revised circular economy strategy I mentioned will in turn set new targets for recycled construction materials and construction waste and demolition waste. So again, you do need to keep up to date in terms of this fast-moving agenda. At government level, there's some very interesting things happening. I was more than hugely impressed with the Department of Education's ongoing work in relation to life cycle projects and life cycle carbon. A very impressive piece of work. And indeed, the Irish Green Business Council are doing also hugely important work on calculating and making recommendations on embedded carbon in building construction. So again, if you're in this space, check out these reference documents, talk to the relevant people, and try and get acquainted with the latest trends and developments. Life cycle costs is a tricky area. There are probably a half a dozen people in the country fully understand what this involves. It is complicated, and thankfully the Society of Chartered Surveyors of Ireland, among others, have produced guidance. So if you want to start in relation to works, go to the Chartered Surveyors Institute guide based on EN, a European standard 15975. The European Commission also has quite a few tools, but there are literally hundreds of potential templates. You have to pick the one that's relevant. And thankfully, in each of the EPA's 11 guides, there's a recommended life cycle costing tool for each product sector. There's currently guidance on reporting for government departments. This will be overtaken, I suspect, by much more detailed guidance and pro forma formatting forms on a comply and justify basis across the entire public sector. And this will be one of the key areas to be addressed and clarified in that deeper circular I talked about. The reason is that public bodies must report on greenhouse gas emissions, the scope 1, 2, and 3. And they also have to indicate indicators and monitoring. And this is an extract from one document I had sight of. You can see the type and level of detail for works contracts. Now, if you're not able to deliver this sort of level of measurement, you may not be able to bid, or if you're going to bid, you will not be scoring high as marks as those companies that can. So being able to calculate and demonstrate and communicate these metrics is going to be hugely important in the works area. Long term, and we're talking 4 or 5 years hence, ISO 2400 will drive all of this. This is the gold standard for sustainable procurement. I'm not aware of any public body in Ireland has it yet. I'm not aware of any private sector company that has it. But in turn, over time, this will become the gold standard. So if you're really seriously interested in sustainability and procurement, you would start aligning your processes and standards to this particular ISO. Over time, maybe apply to be certified. Green public procurement is, without any doubt, complex. It adds a layer of complexity to procurement, which in itself is very complex, but it's utterly necessary. We do not want to be buying carbon credits in 2030 because we haven't reduced our carbon emissions. And procurement can help us suitably and proportionately applied to help Ireland progressively reduce its carbon emissions. Every kilo of carbon taken out of the Irish economy over the next 5 years is a contribution. So even if a micro enterprise can take a small amount of carbon by delivering a service more smartly, you're helping everyone. The Climate Action Plan and the Circular Economy Strategy, supported by enabling legislation, are the drivers. At the moment, the Green Public Procurement Strategy is persuasive. It is not mandatory. So these arrangements I've talked about are, in a way, guidance. There's no supporting legislation, but with a major caveat that you must look at the deeper and study the deeper circular on the implementation of this strategy when it's published in the near future. And the government, through Enterprise Ireland, is acutely aware of the importance of communication and training. This presentation, I think, is a good example of training to help the SME community bid more sensibly and score those 5 marks. Finally, just to recap, sustainable procurement means that you, when bidding for work, supplies or services, that you're giving value for money on a life cycle basis, and you're generating environmental benefits for that contract, but also for the society and the national economy writ large. So get into this sustainability space, and I hope this presentation will give you an introduction into the world of green public procurement.
Thank you for your attention, and that was very insightful. For companies listening to this webinar looking to develop green public procurement strategy, it is important from the competitive point of view to actually have sustainability strategy and action map that incorporates green procurement as a part of your tender package. And I'll just share my screen quickly to give you an overview of our supports that are available for client companies to build a green public procurement strategy, and you've probably seen them before. So we here at Enterprise Ireland helping companies to develop sustainability strategy, decarbonization roadmap, and ESG strategies through range of capability development supports for sustainability, and companies can use this support to develop green procurement strategy as well. So you're very familiar with our offerings such as Climate Action Voucher, Green Starts. Companies can use these supports definitely to develop their sustainability strategy and green public procurement strategy. We also have a couple of training initiatives in progress. So any Enterprise Ireland or local enterprise office client companies, they can also register for training initiatives such as Sustainable Kickstarter workshops and Sustainability Leaders programs. And like Peter highlighted, we have webinars on different sustainability topics that are available on our website that are great knowledge resource for client companies when they are looking to acquire knowledge on different sustainability topics. So thank you so much for taking your time to listen to this webinar. And like we mentioned, please reach out to us if you have any questions related to this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you.